we would welcome your input, a minute or so before or after we're done, but ultimately, this is a workshop for the board, and we certainly want your input if needed. Terry and I sat down with Christy and Laura. We do have, obviously, the letter of resignation from Neil, so he's out of the picture, so we had to kind of pick up from scratch and move forward with this. It appeared that, well, we had a deficit for next year and currently. So when they ran this paperwork yesterday, got these numbers all put together for this year, we ran short $508,000 from what we expected. So we budgeted for 8.788, and we ended up at, as far as our revenues, we ended up at 8.706, and that was short 508. However, there are some things, some people were slightly over in revenues, some expenses were slightly down. When you get down to the bare bones of this year's budget, it appears that we're going to have about a $61,000 deficit, but some of this cost can be spread back, and Christy and Laura are somewhat generating a plan right now. We're not sure we're going to end up in a deficit yet, but we need to make sure that all our departments are very mindful that this year is an important year, and that we're watching what we're spending, especially towards the end of the year. And if you guys want to, I can go through this page by page. I went through it in quite great detail this morning. If this was in color, it'd be slightly easier, but if you looked at the first, there's like 4 pages here that is revenues, and you can look through where some of those revenues were short in each different segment there.
They're in parentheses.
Yes, and that does help. And then if you flip back 4 pages, you see where it says total revenues, and it's about halfway through. So the revenues on one side were $295,000 and change over, thank goodness. And after you apply that back to what we was short, there's a $215,000 difference. And I think it's important that we allow Christy and Laura to do our semi-annual budget amendments as they're presented here at some point. That way they can go through this and figure out where it's best. Some of this could probably go in the shortfall that we had in property taxes. There may be some other areas they want to spread that to, but on the very last page, if you don't want to be bored with all the center stuff, is where it just breaks down where the shortfall was. And it's so hard to follow on these pages. If you look at year-to-date balance, that's that in the parentheses, $508,000 that we're short. We clearly spent 8.487, and we haven't, on the revenue side, there's 7.97 that's not been applied back. So there's just a difference here of, what was that, Laura? There's $726,000 that most of that probably won't get collected in revenues yet, so.
Has Mr. Mason got us anything back on personal tax? Because I know the city's taking a pretty good hit for personal tax.
He did.
We took that into account for the 2014.
How much?
We took that into account for the 2014 when it was budgeted.
I emailed that out because he sent it to me, a pretty detailed list. I don't remember what it was now, but I did email it to you guys.
And then 100% of veterans is being kicked around the town.
That we don't know yet.
We don't know what that total
Because I
is.
know they're picking up a lot of forms of the townships.
Yes, there's, I believe about 22 out there so far that
I
we know
believe
about.
there's is there 120 vets or something in
129.
Gladwin? So, if you did some quick math and you look at the property values and You know, it could be a $50,000 hit or something in that neighborhood, you know, somewhere in there. Yeah, all of that too affects the bottom line here. So that's where those are this year. Is there any questions on this year's? So hopefully, after we spread this back, and if we can, you know, go the last couple weeks of this year without spending much, we can end up pretty close. Because if we end up in a deficit, then we've got to do a deficit elimination plan and have that. So that's that. Additionally, we have what we worked on the other day, the 2014 budget, and when we ran numbers on that, we was, where is that number here? $506,000 short. I believe did we decide that we aren't paying the $300,000 back from unallocated this year?
At this next board meeting, the board is going to make action on that based on where we're at with revenues.
So whatever that number is, we're gonna have to forgive ourselves that,
Right.
which will leave us in the neighborhood of 400,000, whatever, left and unallocated. We wanted,
262,000 in unallocated.
so, right
I'm
now,
sorry, 362,000, yeah,
but we don't know what that end number is.
right.
And,
There's 350,000 that was budgeted out of that for the 2014 year. So there's only 12,000 in there.
so we had 506,000, we don't necessarily know what our, union contracts are gonna save us, if anything. And although we're hoping that it's 100-ish, so we cut, our proposed cuts total in the neighborhood of $400,000. And again, we was 4 hours up here trying to delicately balance those numbers. And there's just not, it's not a perfect world, and I don't know, you know, where else this board wants to go. Those cuts, and I don't have that one spreadsheet in front of me. Those cuts included to the sheriff department, elimination of marine patrol, a reduction of a lieutenant's position, and a sergeant's position, which ultimately bumps to deputies, the jail administrator, and the sheriff department secretary going to 35-hour work week like the courthouse employees, 29-hour work week for all part-time employees, 4 months for MSU for that dollar value. And again, we left their phone lines on, we're not evicting them out of the building, you know, we want to sit down with MSU.
Josh, sorry to interrupt you, but how much money do you have in the budget for MSU extensions? I don't have that number yet.
What is that? 21,325. The bailiffs line item was reducing that by 40,000. Reduction from full-time to part-time, police senior secretary and district court, friend of the court, probate court, and elimination of a law clerk and circuit court. And reductions and appropriations, 50% reduction to the airport, 12.5 instead of 25. No grant match, but they didn't plan on having one next year. 10,000 on, did we settle on 10,000 on EDC? What line item's that one, Laura?
the non-public.
$7,500 for EDC, which we started at 30, dropped it to 20, then to 15, now we're at 7,500. The clerk's office has a retirement, so there's no replacement there. The treasurer gave us some more hours on her part-time employee. Looking at doing contractual services for our janitorial. There's some savings there. Is that everything? So, if you look at the very last page here, the more important part of this is the bottom line. In 2011, we was at 9.2, then 2012 was 9.1, 2013 was 8.7, the amended is 8.8, although some of that will most certainly be changed back. I don't know where we'll end up this year, because currently we're at 8.1, and we're hoping to be at 8.126 next year. And, you know, we need to be mindful that, and it's not everybody's fault. I mean, everybody's been working pretty well together, as stressful as it is, but there's some DHS increases and the probate court funds, and as much as they'll budget one number and we'll reduce that because we're really just trying to, you know, keep people really conservative. I don't know what else we can do. You know, it's been a tough, long haul, and if things don't turn around, if property values don't come up, if the state don't continue to cut on these different things, you know, some of these new laws that they keep passing hit the counties. If that don't start turning around, you know, we'll end up having to do reductions again next year. Animal shelter, that's one. There's a reduction in animal shelter from a full-time to a part-time for his assistant. Can you think of anything else? So we should, you know,
Who's got the list out there? I'm sure somebody's got it. It was floating pretty good
I
last
can
year.
look it up here, but
Was that right?
Never mind.
Oh,
I had it.
I have the list right here, but it's got a lot of handwritten notes on it. I'm gonna bring to your attention.
You don't want
You don't want
me
to share them with us?
Yeah, I'm just waiting my turn, thank you.
I don't know where it went, but. So some of this is gonna tie back, you know, this is clearly what we did the other day. We really had to squeeze, you know, to get what we did, and then we even reduced small in people's line items, small reductions, just to get the budget balanced. And that's with no fund equity at all. That's a perfect world. You know, there's no added expenses. You know, price of fuel don't go up, whatever. But by law, obviously, we have to adopt a balanced budget. So, input?
No, we're still debating certain points along the health insurance. That hasn't been finalized, too. So, double clutch.
Does EDC figure they can make it, or
Nobody can make it
is it
without.
No.
It's the same thing with us, though. You know, we have a budget to balance somehow with reductions and additional mandates. You know, yesterday, Laura and I was talking yesterday, and I was so frustrated because I got an email from Neil, and the Department of Treasury needs additional paperwork, and then I had to call the road commission and have that forwarded to me, and that has to go to them, and now they want that rewritten and resubmitted, not just a simple, here's the numbers that you want, they want everything redone. You know, and we're sitting here without much help, and Josh Reed's getting a little stressed out, but again, without the help of the clerk and treasurer, I just couldn't do it. So, you wanna take some public comments? See what they have to say.
Sure, Shay's got something to say.
Yeah,
We have 60 seconds.
59. On your list of cuts, the very first thing it talks about the reduction in non-mandated services. In the very next paragraph, if you will, we deal with the jail and the reductions in the jail. For years, I've had to sit through painful meetings talking about how jails are mandated and that road patrol is not mandated. Does anybody remember these arguments? Because they went on and on, back into the Sheriff Walters era even. It's things like that after I'd spent hours discussing things with council and so on and so forth, and even some of the commissioners, that when we attack or reduce the amount of spending for a mandated service, it's not my jail, gentlemen, it's our jail. And you may or may not know this, and I had my jail administrator come in today, so you can even ask him poignant questions. There's a reason that he has to leave the duties that he normally does and come out and work the floor almost daily, is because you already don't have enough personnel there. And we want to reduce this guy even further than he's already there with his personnel and so on. We do transports now because corrections officers do them, because it's our cheapest way to transport them. And we're giving them weapons retention and so on so they can do it. So it's cheaper than your road patrol guys. Guess who fills in for them while they're gone? Guess who does the prison packets for people like Rowan and Martinez? That doesn't just magically happen. I mean, there's your corrections folks for you. We're talking about 5 hours a week here. We go 24/7. If somebody doesn't show up in a Monday through Friday organization, you know what you can do? Not fill it. We have to have personnel there all the time. Nights, weekends, you know, and you got some part-timers in there, and so on and so forth. But those are the things that we're dealing with. I went through these already with the board and some of the finance folks. There's no personnel left. Don't even ask me anymore, because apparently when I say it, it's not legitimate. Ask the jail administrator. And there's one aspect. The other thing, the way this is written is somewhat misleading, because it says the elimination of a lieutenant. I have a lieutenant. That's all I have. Remember we had 2 lieutenants and 4 sergeants when I took over as sheriff? You know what? You've got a lieutenant and 2 sergeants. Who do you think's doing all that work right now? It's not just magically happening. We take that 120 hours a week from that lieutenant and those 2 people and give it to people like Matt and Ray and that kind of thing. And I sat through painful long meetings about how these things aren't something we can get by on. You're leaving the community out for a huge, huge safety concern. There's people in that jail right now that murdered their fathers. Well, I take that back. He's back in prison now. Cut his own father's throat. They beat some of our local residents in the head with ball-peen hammers. You know what? They're not nice folks. And you've got a skeleton crew over there right now taking care of it. So this idea of elimination of a lieutenant and the elimination of a sergeant. Your sergeants are working the road. I'll take one for an example. Jim Cuddy, not to mention names, but it's the only detective I have, and everybody in here already knows who it is, stayed up for 76 hours during that Robinette thing, or longer. Ray might know the answer to this. Do you not, anybody have any idea why? Because there's nobody else to give it to. It's our single detective. There's no other deputies, because guess what? Gladwin County in general still goes on. The public still complains about being robbed, and by God, they have a right to. So they got a right to get those deputies sent to their house to investigate those things. You've only got 2 people doing it. So there's no way to, we can't just shut the community down when something huge happens
No questions, a few comments. One, you know, it is unfortunate that the public safety millage did not pass. To me, it's a bit shameful, but we're put in a position where we only have so much money. We've, for the first time that I can remember, and I followed commission minutes and meetings many years, long before I was a commissioner, you know, we threatened road patrol and laying off cops. We haven't done that. We've made cuts and consolidations since 2008 before, you know, getting into reductions in public safety and so on. And I don't like it any better than you do, but our constituents have told us which direction they want us to go. And we may or may not agree with it, but I was only one vote. So will we go for another millage? There's a possibility that that's something this board will entertain, but until then, we don't have enough money. Nobody, I didn't have a conversation with one department head that willingly, maybe there was one, that came forward and said, I got a whole lot of money to give you. We don't. We've all worked very hard over the past several years to look at some of these reductions, and it's just not enough. So Terry and I were, you know, and we listened to most everything that our department heads brought to us. Terry and I sat down and had to make some tough decisions, and when we was in, you know, doing your department, we can sit down and talk to you again about what you want to reduce, but there has to be reductions. And our objective was not taking any more road patrol off the road, so this community was somewhat safe. So some of these inside things, if somebody else has to jump in and help them, where there's some of the hourly reductions, great. You know, hopefully that happens. we're all working with less staff, so, yeah, I don't like it any better than you do, and we can take some direction from you, certainly before Thursday, but it's gonna have to be real quick.
Two quick things. The elimination and consolidation that's been done, 2 lieutenants, I have 1. 4 sergeants, I have 2. The reduction of that has been on behalf of us working there, number 1. Number 2, the idea that the public has spoken based on this millage that they don't want cops. If anybody believes that, you're out of your mind. That's not what the public said. We're talking, I spoke with plenty of public, and they didn't say we don't want our policemen. I've yet to hear that from anybody. And maybe I'm wrong, but I was out to plenty of meetings. Many times I felt somewhat lonely out there. And what about, you know what I mean by that. Having said that, that's not what I got from the public during that. So just keep that in mind as we move forward. It's not about police and money, it's about your county finances in general. It's not about cops.
I agree that, you know, I would have thought that millage would have passed. As many people as I spoke to and as many meetings as I was at, I would have thought it would have passed, but it didn't. So now we have a task before us. And, you know, we don't like it any better than anybody else would. Any other comments?
Well, I agree with much of what the sheriff had to say, and in fact, I guess I agree with all of it. I don't think he said anything I disagree with. And I think one thing that you better bear in mind is, I realize you have a task where you think, I have to come up with a budget that balances on paper. But going into next year, this is not just a smoke and mirrors game of, okay, I came up with something that balanced on paper, because if you do what you're proposing, as I understand it, I guarantee you the sheriff is right. When we go into next year, the revenues are going to go down. You can't simply say we have a $506,000 shortfall in our minds, and therefore we'll eliminate on the left side of the ledger here, positions, or reduce to part-time positions, and lo and behold, that adds up to $506,000. Because on the other side of the column, the revenues are going to decrease. You lay off those road deputies, or actually it's up to the sheriff whether you lay them off. You can't lay them off. You can cut his budget, but you can't determine where he spends it. But as a practical matter, if those road deputies are out there, first and most importantly, the public is not going to be as safe as it is now. Second, the revenues are going to fall. You lay off the person in the front of the court's office, first off, we already have someone on long-term health leave right now, so we're shorthanded down there anyway. It's been years since we added a position, but let's say you do lay them off. That position is 80 to 85% reimbursed by the state at the end of the day. So you may over here say, we just saved 100% of their salary and fringe, but in reality, you save 15%, if that. Then in addition, if you want to talk about particular cases, when you started speaking, Chairman Reed, you said, well, we're looking at cutting non-mandated positions. That law clerk is mandated by law. It's required by law. And as a matter of fact, we're required by law to have 2 law clerks. And Judge Mink and I, and in particular Judge Mink, have been extremely flexible in working with the board for the last 7 years to say we will limp by with 1 law clerk instead of the 2 that we're required by law to have. And then the thanks that we get is, okay, now let's eliminate that law clerk position. Number 1. Number 2, that position is 50% funded by Clare County in any event. And number 3, that's an extremely vital position, and you get more bang for your buck with that job than any other, I would venture to guess, in the whole county. You get young people starting out their legal careers who are willing to work for a relative pittance because they know that's a great job. They know it's a job they can county, and as a circuit court, get the benefit of having an extremely intelligent, capable, necessary person to do the needed research to help us out in our jobs. So it's a win-win situation, and this county gets more bang for its buck with that position than any other I can think of. The other thing is, I know from your point of view, in particular, Chairman Reed and Commissioner Whittington, you sat down, you worked long and hard, you looked at this budget, but I don't think you got the input from the department heads that you perhaps wanted. I know you didn't get the input from the courts, and I certainly hope none of this is carved in stone, because I realize you have some deadlines coming up on Thursday, or you have a meeting on Thursday. It's not a deadline, but the deadlines are coming. And I certainly hope you're going to be open-minded about this, because I think there are some real serious factors you're not considering here.
Well, you are right when you say we didn't get any input from the courts. Our response from the courts was, use last year's numbers. Those just don't work for us, you know. And I realized that it was coming up tight towards the end of the year, but we was dealing with a financial coordinator that wanted to make sure that those numbers, the expenditures and revenues mid-year, were accurate. And then we started having our differences from there on out. It was requested at a department head meeting that we sit down with the departments, and not just our financial coordinator felt that we should just institute the budgets. We decided that we'd sit down with the department heads. We did sit down with many, and we sat down with whoever would come to us, but, you know, we did the best we could with the time we had and what was given to us. I'm more than happy to sit down with you.
Okay, thank you.
I would love to, and hopefully, you know, we can sit down and, there has to be cuts. So if you can come up with money, we don't want to cut anything. We'd love not to cut anything, but clearly there has to be cuts. Otherwise, you know, we're already guessing we're going to have to borrow the first part of next year by, and it's a guess, February-ish. We'll literally be borrowing cash from the bank.
You know, I would just like to mention that I appreciate what the judge and the sheriff said, and with all due respect to them, but if we were not to make any cuts in the courts, in the sheriff, and I say the jail, all the things like so, it leaves us, what looks to me like maybe two alternatives. One is curtail some of the days that this courthouse is open, or the hours of the employees that there. I don't know what else there is. I don't know what else we could cut. And we haven't researched what it would, we're open 4 days a week now. You go down to 3 days a week. I mean, we're running out of options.
Do you have any suggestions for the courts?
Well, there are things I would be willing to talk to you about, but I think the biggest thing is, you know, we are mandated by law to provide justice to the county, and we already have been operating much like the sheriff department. We've been operating with a skeleton crew as it is. When you look at the circuit court, we've only got the 2 judges, the 2 assignment clerks, and 1 law clerk. That's it. So where do you cut there? And then district court has, you know, they're stretched pretty thin too. Earlier this year or late last year, they had been reduced by a clerk, and they were not keeping their heads above water. They met with the commissioners, and that clerk position was reinstated. Similarly with probate court, we went through a period of time shortly after Judge Klaus was elected where we were down to 2 clerks in that office, the clerk register and the clerk reporter. And she met with the committee, and then the board voted to allow her to hire another clerk. So these are things that the board has looked at in the past and evaluated and said there is a need for this. It's not like there's a lot of fat to cut, but certainly there are things, you know, we're certainly willing to talk.
When you're available, Terry, I'll sit down with them.
Well, I just, you know, I'm sitting there not flabbergasted, but I mean, if we do, and I know what the mandates are for both of them. I mean, I know what their jobs are, but if we don't do, what alternative do we have left, is what I'm asking. Because I don't have any more suggestions.
The only,
Pardon?
the concern I would have is this. It's one thing if this really would balance the budget and you move into the future and you have a leaner, less capable government, but you're limping along. That's one thing, but what I'm afraid is going to happen and what I predict is going to happen is you're going to go into a failure spiral where you cut the personnel and then over here the revenue drops precipitously more than you thought it would. So now you have to cut the personnel some more, and the whole thing just spirals down to the bottom.
I don't disagree with you. I really don't disagree with you. I don't know what our options are.
I don't either. The fact of the matter is, and I know this is gonna sound like a nasty statement, and I don't mean to be that way, but there's gonna be some payless paydays here if we don't do something.
And I know the public's not gonna give us an operation millage. We've already seen that with with the public safety.
In time, it's getting short. If anyone has any suggestions for us, I'm open to any of them.
Yeah,
And I
me
know
too.
we all are. And I don't blame the department heads, I certainly don't blame the judge and the sheriff for explaining to us what their jobs and duties are, but I don't know what else to do. Get a budget that we can work with.
Sheriff, the Marine is still funded partially, right?
Yeah, last year we got about, I think we just got electronic funds transfer about $10,000 or $11,000, somewhere in that neighborhood. Fair statement, Christine?
Yeah.
So there's a $22,000 savings, it's a $33,000 budget in that neighborhood. And, you know, he is obligated as the sheriff, but we have enough, as we know, fire departments that he can order us to go out and do recoveries, and or if we have to, then we pull a boat and send somebody out, you know. None of it is perfect. Absolutely none of this is perfect.
I have to write that budget too, not to get into the intricacies of it, but that budget is due
The grant.
for the grant by December 31st. So if zero is the thing, I won't bother writing it. In the event that there's elimination of two, like I had already previously mentioned, I'm back to my less than 1978 police levels, which would jeopardize our 416 program. But apparently I've been told that there's some there's a stress on your local fiscal government that you can somehow retain that thing, but I've yet to read that or know that firsthand. That was relayed to me by the board, which would mean we'll lose 3.
I don't know what else to say.
Pretty much what I expected.
Oh, yeah. Sure. And I don't believe MSU or anyone else arguing your point. Well taken, but back to the matter is, got to cut something.
And I think we should always factor in what the sheriff just said too about what's the impact of that cut and beyond the money. In the sense that he pointed out the funding, for example, for some of it's partly shared by Claire,
We knew that.
and then the state, the 85% on the one employee percent. No, we're not using examples, not specific something, but I don't see, last night I spent 4 or 5 hours studying this whole thing. There's nothing jumps off the page.
Mr. Reed?
It's not that kind of a problem that you can solve with just a red pencil and do this stuff. There's no silver bullet in English to solve it, so.
Doug, did you have something?
I was talking with Judge Evans for a minute here. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Don, but he said that either late today or tomorrow he'd be able to break free and meet with the finance committee for a few minutes. That would help out, at least to try to sort out his thoughts about maybe some alternatives.
And you have your own agendas, I realize that, so,
Agenda.
you don't have to work around, you have your own schedule, you put it that way.
I was gonna say,
You
my
might have your
agenda
own
is to
agenda,
figure this
too,
out,
but
so I'm available anytime.
You might have your own agenda, but you certainly have your own schedule. So.
What time is good for you? Can you do something this afternoon?
This afternoon,
Hmm? Can you meet right after the meeting by chance, or?
Sure.
Because we're probably close to done, and then we could, and then I'll get with the sheriff afterwards, he's nodding his head, yeah. All right,
And I'm not trying to jump to the head of the line or anything, but I'm certainly willing to.
we're more than happy to sit down, we just, before our correspondence was weak.
what's the meeting, what's the purpose of the meeting?
Do you have some
Well,
other
I don't
ideas
know.
to share?
Well, basically, if you don't want to meet, or if you think that's unproductive,
No,
then,
I don't mean, I was just wondering, Judge, if. we've had
well, I
so
wanted
many-
to go over with you some of the proposals that are made, and also there have been some new changes, as you alluded to earlier, some of the laws that the state legislature that has been passing that have had an impact on you as a county board. Also, there are some laws that have curtailed the flexibility local units of government have in budgeting process, and also there's some requirements that are placed on courts if there's an impasse reached in the budgeting process, and we should probably discuss some of those things too if you have a moment.
Sure. You wanna do it right afterwards?
I'm willing to meet with anybody on anything, but of all the department head meetings we've had, input and, met with each department, at a time, I'll be there.
Well,
Thank you.
so we'll just meet with you right after this meeting?
Sure.
That's probably best for me anyways.
Thank you.
And then we'll report back to this board before our meeting. It's scheduled for Thursday.
Can I speak up? My position was slated for reduction also, and I'm just wondering, our department's already been slashed 2 people as it is, and I'm just wondering how that come about, where you're, I know you're not nitpicking every individual and you got a budget to balance. I would like to know where that's coming from, as far as where there'd be a cost savings if my position was contracted out. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm doing the best I can for, being the only one doing all the cleaning and everything. So I just wonder if there's anything that can be worked out, to get this situation straightened out with my department and everybody else's. And my position definitely is not important, more or as important as a law officer or this gentleman sitting over here running the jail administration. And if I was to lose my job, I'd rather see this gentleman over here with his job, or because the importance of him having his position over mine is greatly more important, but I just, if anything can be worked out, you know, where, you know, like I said, my main concern is where's the cost savings if they outsource my job, and if there's anything can be done, it's greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Anything else? All right, we'll meet with the judge.
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, the committee meeting. I'll support that. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion passes.